I mean, I might as well talk about something. It might as well be raid experience, even though a lot of my experience has been raid anyway. But I know I've talked about it before. We can talk about, but I want to talk about more specific examples as we get Herald World of Horror 3 custom mysteries. You also might hear my clothes really quickly because I'm wearing something completely different. But as we get into this, so Herald, I forgot what it was, so I'm just gonna set it to a random backstory. My goodness, I already forgot. It might have actually just been World of Horror, but, oh my goodness, that's the sound of my clothes now. But we'll get into Herald's 7th Curse instead, with 3 custom mysteries on a custom character. So 6 strength, 4 dexterity, 6 perception, 4 knowledge, 8 charisma, I don't know how much luck, but we'll do our best, and we don't need both weapons. I prefer the fire axe, but if I get a faster police revolver, even though we're not on random item stats, extra damage might be nice. Second mystery, strength, Toxicon, second encounter, light check, and maybe a charisma check, so only a strength check really, and then we lose up to 5 reason. But as I said before in the thumbnail of this video may show, because I did want to talk about it. I don't know why specifically, but yeah, FF14 stuff, because it was interesting. As always, the thesis statement for me was, I hated raiding, loved the people, but I hated raiding for myself. Not that I don't understand why raiding is important, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that I personally hated raiding. I guess you can call it cowardice, as we have mermaids, flood, labyrinth, story, and cult. Ooh, that's a ugly thing. I guess we take labyrinth first. We could take story first, but I'd rather do... no, we'll do story and see how bad it goes. You could call it cowardice, you could call it someone who doesn't like being out of their comfort zone. To a larger extent, I guess it is really just me trying to avoid... It's an MMORPG, you're meant to be playing with a lot of people, but at the same time, I oftentimes like to keep to myself regardless, but... I mean, that's a me thing, so, as we... Ooh, Curse Doll. Yeah, I'll take Curse Doll. We have a weapon already, so I can afford to just waste... Or, not waste Doom. Use up Doom. But otherwise, here, I think we might even end up throwing the police revolver. It depends, we're taking minus all, so... All things considered, yeah, so we could... This Curse Doll could come in handy, because I would rather lose 1 to 2 stamina than lose 2 reason as well, so... Actually, that was quite lucky that we got the Curse Doll. Before I talked more, Hospital and Village max threat level. Downtown high, and I think we have a few village investigations, funny enough. Which I wanted for myself. I think at some point before all of the custom content became available in World of Horror, I must have mentioned a line about Village being an location we needed to investigate more, and so I'm reaping the benefits or consequences of my own actions. Sometimes it's beneficial to visit the Village, but hey. But yeah, I guess part of my comfort zone as someone who likes to stay inside and, you know, play video games and make videos on a channel and stream and whatnot. As it turns out, yeah, I don't socialize as much, but still, that's not... Well, that is actually a big part of raiding, being able to socialize to some extent, but the bare minimum is being able to perform the content and work in a team, which is what I could do, which is why I was brought in. Pretty much, I think I never... Any static that I was a part of, I was brought in, or in a few cases, I was a replacement for someone who was not available. There were some parts, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, I've failed to... My very first memory of MMORPGing in general for World of Horror, as I took that in the face and I should have cursed Dull, was not stepping in con flags, and that was really, really bad. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just think that there were mechanics and there are things that I had to do and I failed to do them. That's essentially the conceptual generalization that you need to know. That's the idea you need to get. But as it went through and I learned more how to basically get into the groove of raiding in general, I did find my own way, and that was essentially looking up the fight, especially because I was never really part of getting into content immediately. Oh, I would have liked it to be 1 stamina instead. I guess we can throw... We do have a bottle of water, but I would have liked to lose 1 stamina, because then I would have been able to curse Dull comfortably again. This isn't gonna kill, is it? No, it's not. 12 damage, we need more. Probably throw the empty bottle. I could curse Dull again, but I don't feel like it. I think I can instead brace here. Let me concentrate on not dying, and I'll continue on what I was talking about. But if we brace here, we should be able to survive still. The question afterward is if I do enough... Yeah, empty. If I throw the empty bottle, I don't want to. I could gamble on 75%, but that... Let's try not to lose as many runs as possible, and let's do this, even though I've messed up before. But essentially, for raiding, I took down notes, and if it was a fight that was out for longer than a week or two, which is normally not the time I was introduced to any raiding, in any part of FF14 specifically, then yeah, I looked up the fight and then I studied rigorously, so I didn't make mistakes on my own, because otherwise, yeah. And obviously we go over group strats. Back in, I mainly raided during all of the Alexander tiers, really. I think there was one tier in Alexander I didn't do, but I feel like I was part of every one at some point. And I was usually brought in between, and specifically speaking, I mean, I might as well just say it because it's not really a secret. Yeah, let's take Flood now. Was that I have a brother in real life, and my brother was like, "Oh, I'll invite Jordan," and then he comes and asks me, "It's like, Jordan, you want to raid?" And I'm, you mind joining in for raid? And I'm just like, I don't want to, but I'll do it. And so I said, yeah. So really, it's on me to not accept or accept, but I decided to do so, and I don't regret it. Again, I like the people, just didn't like raiding myself, so. If someone from the raiding scene who knows me back in those days, I think the last time I actually did raid was in Stormblood, because I stopped playing around Endwalker when Endwalker came out. Just because, like, really, and it's kind of sad, it's just my personal situation changed, and so I no longer had the time. Otherwise, I would be playing FF14 right now, like, right now. Although, at this point, I'm also racing horses and whatnot, so in a way, that's not true either. Let's rest here before we die, by the way. But, I wonder if we can survive here. The Curse Doll is going to be nice for Flood here really quickly, but anywho. We also have a lot of Doom if we survive, is the other half of this equation. So even though it looks bad for me in World of Horror right now, trust me, we're actually doing quite well. We have 3 luck, by the way. Didn't know that, but anywho. So yeah, if anyone from those days sees me or hears me talking about this, just know I didn't really hate it. I don't think I've ever really had maybe like 2 or 3 bad experiences, but in statics, not really anything raid-wise anyway. Obviously, pugging was absolutely miserable for me. When it got bad, it got bad. I'm not saying that all of my pugging experience was bad, but it was more than a few instances in which I was like, why do I do this to myself? By the way, so yeah, we just swing this really hard. We Curse Doll a few times. We might as well treat it as if we're taking all damage here. So yeah, the earliest, I think the very first, I think FF14 was essentially my first MMORPG. Unless you want to somehow count Monster Hunter, specifically Monster Hunter Tri. And even then, I didn't really play online multiplayer in that game anyway, so... Yeah, really it was FF14, and so was invited to doing the coil, and I, stepping in conflags, fighting on an elevator, forgetting to pot on the elevator, which caused the wipe. Things like that are some of my experiences, so... and pot specifically for damage, and I tanked... I think there was only one tier, and that was during Omega, final Omega tier, in which I played as a DPS. And then, funny enough, during that tier, I was brought in as a tank, and I forgot to LB, and we got blasted by the Ray in the middle of the fight. But if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But anywho, let's get into Labyrinth here. But yeah, more specifically, I think it was mostly Alexander. I think if you look on certain websites, you'll still see the data, because that website holds data whether you opt in or not. So my data is just on there. And it's not bad, but it's not great. I know I could perform better, but execution, funny enough, and hand-eye coordination, as odd as that sounds, even though I didn't think FF14 was too hard on the execution standpoint, and in my opinion, it's gotten certainly easier through Endwalker and now in Dawn Trail. Yeah, anywho. But yeah, during Alexander, I definitely remember things. There's very, very minute things, especially surprising things as when you push phases too quickly. And I think it's Lame Brick's Strike Box, if I'm getting the name correct, who decides to fire into the sky. And I'm like, well, I'm a warrior, and back then Berserk pacified you. So I was just like, well, pacified. And I think you assume it? I don't even remember. Oh my goodness, it's been so long. But I had to call. I was like, oh, I'm pacified, because when you're Berserk, you get pacified. And I think they just ended up, they removed that, and then they just removed or changed the kit, warrior's kit in total. And then I was just sitting there. So we're taking -3 all damage here. I could just punch. I could also swing this axe really, really hard, which I would rather do. Yeah, I would rather do that. Now, if we get to about 3 stamina, there is some merit in thinking about using the Cursed Doll, but if possible, I would like to not do that. So let's see how many of these we hit. Because I think we can, if we hit every one of these, we can do a Desperate Strong. Now, we can't prep, but 95% if we miss this, I mean, it's a warranted end of a video. And also, it would have been a sign for me to not talk about FF14 during a World of Horror video. But anywho, other noticeable experiences outside of raiding anyway, closer to my pug experience, was specifically, and it always stays in my mind, and I'm not trying to call out anyone, it was just a pug experience. Well, I say just, but we'll call it during Dungeon X. There was a tank while I was leveling, I think specifically I was leveling a DPS job, but I think it was also close to the beginning of an expansion, but decided to, you know, you do your dailies and you try to get more experience and whatnot, and there was a tank that couldn't hold aggro, and I remember this, and obviously this sounds like a very common experience, but I'll explain why it's not as common. Because while that was true, and we did have to, I basically, it was to the point where I and the other DPS had to literally stop hitting ads. We had to spend 3 GCDs not hitting ads. And again, I'm not saying the tank was bad, it's just, you just roll with it, but even the healer, when they had to heal the tank, because we were doing slow, like, one group pulls, because otherwise aggro goes all over the place. And for those who don't know, basically, if the tank cannot hold aggro, everyone's getting slapped, and you die quicker when you're not a tank. But yeah, that happened, and as we reached, when we eventually completed the dungeon, so at least that's the main goal. And I think I gave the tank a commendation. I would like to say I did, but oh my goodness, by the way, hold on. Let me focus on not dying here. Can I do 2 attacks? 95%, or 95% really, only once. And if you miss this, well, pain. Okay, good. And so at the end of the dungeon, I decided, because there are people who create content on FF14 or stream FF14, and so I won't say which it was, but whether it was a chat or a comment, there was a very specific post/comment that said, hey, how do I hold aggro, content creator? I was in said dungeon, and this was the same Dungeon X that I was in, so I was like, huh, that's a weird comment to comment right after, less than an hour after I finished. And then there was a response from the content creator that essentially went, yeah, you just do the combo, because at that time, if you turned on tank stance and did your combo, whether it's AoE or single target, you'll hold, because that's how it works. And there was literally no problem at the time with aggro during this part of FF14. And so what ended up happening, I was like, huh. And then the person said what their job was, and they're like, is there specific hints? And I was like, huh. That's an interesting coincidence. Again, I'm being very vague here, just to not call anyone out, but it was something. It was definitely an experience to remember. If nothing else, even though it sounds like I'm salty or I sound negative about these events. Also, oh yeah, sacrificer. We can't fight this, by the way. Sounds negative. I'm actually, it's still, in the end, it was fun. It's good fun. And I think that's a good way to look at even just negative events. Now, if it's something that really makes you angry or really made you sad, I can't control that. I can only say that I, myself, end up looking back at those memories fondly, to use the phrase. But as we enter our last mystery here, man, we're in pain. We have 48% Doom, though. Do we have fetid fumes? If we don't, then I can rest cool. Rest cool. My words. Anywho. But yeah, stories. And I think in fact, I still have, I know I have a video on this channel, or at least a clip of me in Seiryu? But I also think I have a video of the last raid I did. And the primary reason is so that I, as melodramatic, I'm not using the right phrase, but essentially as beautiful as it might sound, it's not really that beautiful. I just wanted to remember basically the last time I was raiding. So even though I said I hated raiding, here I am holding a memorabilia of a raid, the last raid I did. And specifically, I mentioned this before, we'll mention it again because it's been a while. You'll see me kind of click on the hotbar while you're, if you ever go back and watch that video of Omega specifically, Final Omega. And that's because I usually want to keep hitting buttons, because it just doesn't feel right for me to just kind of sit there. Maybe that's fighting game instincts, maybe that's just me having a condition in real life. I feel like I'll always at least self-proclaim that I feel clear of mind and that there are no bodily issues wrong with me. But if there are, I mean, I'm not at all professional in any kind of medical field, so shrug. But yeah, that, and I think specifically I was Monk. Oh my goodness, I actually didn't mean to go into this, but if we're just gonna do this, we might as well just take the burns here. Toxi-san will not be able to do like 12 Doom of damage, and if he does, boy, that would be interesting. Also, you know what I didn't mention? That this is supposed to be one of 3 videos that I'm preparing in advance, so right after this video, I'm probably gonna record a second one. And yeah, and that's because things are happening in real life, so if it gets really serious, I'll just go without posting videos. That's gonna hurt me a lot on this channel, but it wasn't like I was monetizing a lot anyway. Again, my main source of monetization is not actually from this channel, I think. I'd have to check my analytics. But anywho, let's just do this and move on with life. We do have a level up available, but I don't think I really need it. I'll level up just to do so, though. We could have just healed stamina here instead, but I didn't really care. We should be able to survive. I think I took Flit second. And away I go. But anyway, without further ado, if you want to hear more FF14 stories, I definitely have a few more. A lot from crafting and gathering, which is what I normally like to do. Yeah, if at this point you're probably asking, well, Jordan, then what in the world did you do if battle content, which is a large portion of the content, at least it was 3 to 5 years ago and before that, then what were you doing? And I would say literally just crafting and gathering. But that doesn't mean there aren't funny stories, because there were times in which... should I say that? I'm not sure if I should say that. Yeah, I should. If for no other reason than privacy's sake. But anywho, it was something in story, because you fight 2 things. Basically, actually, you could run into something else. I'm just gonna, no, it wasn't. There's no way it's incomplete, Sadako. If there's anything to learn, if you play story as your first mystery, your second encounter will never be incomplete, Sadako, because that is the boss, and you certainly fight at least 2 encounters before that. But anywho, yeah, if you want to hear more stories, let me know. I'll be glad to. I literally have at least 2 more videos worth of stories in my head, and probably written down somewhere as notes. But yeah, without further ado, I'm not going to take up much more of your time. If you want to support me, feel free to do so. Otherwise, wait for me to actually release a game, and if you want to support me monetarily, do that. But otherwise, thank you for watching. I'll see you later. Bye!